What's up, everyone? Hopefully you all are having a very wonderful and blessed day. Today's video will be a long one as we're going to be recapping everything that's been happening in the main story of season 1 for Marvel Rivals. Now when I say main story, I specifically mean the key threads that push the story forward from beginning to end. Now if you want to keep up with the side stories like the Thing finding Black Panther as a vampire or Cloak and Dagger being fused into one person due to the time stream entanglement, please make sure to check out my other videos or even request them in the comments if I haven't gotten to it yet. But today we're only going to be focusing on the main plot threads for Empire of Eternal Night. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get right into it. So this story all starts off with Doom visiting Doctor Strange at his home, the Sanctum Sanctorum, on one of the hottest days New York has seen in quite some time. Strange was studying some arcane rituals when he noticed that an intense chill could be felt coming from outside on Bleecker Street. His neighbors didn't really give it a second thought due to them being used to weird things normally happening with a sorcerer living on their street, but Strange knew that something was coming. What he didn't know was that something was already inside the house, and that something was none other than Victor Von Doom. Strange and Bats greeted Doom as he showed up both uninvited and unexpected, leaving Bats confused as to how he got inside, with Doom stating that the Sanctum may need better protection spells and a better watchdog. Wong was currently out getting stuff like supplies and maybe some groceries, so he's not really present at the moment, while Strange also admits that he should change the locks, but if it's not someone like Doom, he's not too worried about others breaking in the same way he did. He further admits that when the Dark Arts are involved, Doom is skilled enough to rival him. See what I did there? And I managed to sneak that joke in. But if Doom of all people comes looking for help, and if you know Doom, he would rather die than ask for help, something must be very wrong. Doom came to Strange with a plan to break time itself and shape it underneath their will, believing that the possible reward outweighs the risk of messing with time itself. Doom is close to solving the problem, but there's a key ingredient he needs to complete it, and it sits with Doctor Strange himself. While admitting that he often thinks about how both he and Strange have things in their history they wish they could change or even fix entirely. Bats is entirely confused about what Doom was talking about, and Strange states that Doom's current position in life is because of critical mistakes he made in the past, leading Doom to rebuttal. Doom does not make mistakes, but there were certain steps along my journey that if retread could lead to possibilities that are currently out of my reach. Strange himself thought about how his life would be different if the accident that gave birth to Doctor Strange never happened, but he remembered his teachings from the Ancient One about how no mortal being in itself could control fate. Strange tells Doom that no matter what, his journey would have always led him to this point, to him becoming the Sorcerer Supreme, and Doom in a nutshell says that Strange is wrong and he wants to prove him otherwise, but in order to do so, he needs access to a very ancient, a very dangerous and forbidden spell, and it was located inside of the world's most dangerous magical artifact, the Darkhold. Strange told him that the book is not only in his safekeeping but also off limits as well, but he was curious enough to ask Doom which spell he was looking for. The exact spell that he needed is something called the Vampiric Verses, the same spell used by Dracula's mentor ages ago to cheat time and death itself, making him and his legions immortal. Bats, keeping up with the convo a bit more but still a bit confused, thinks that Doom wants to become a vampire. Doom states that he intends to pretty much dissect the spell and figure out how to use it to cheat time like Dracula, but not in the same manner. Strange admits that it is interesting, but it's incredibly too dangerous to even attempt at risking it, so he declines again. Doom, having expected his old friend to decline his request, came prepared to take the book by force if necessary. The two then engage in a fight, with Doom summoning spells like the Veil of Khonshu, and Strange fighting back with the Claws of Bast from the Wakandan ancestral plane. After using a new spell called the Crimson Thorns of Yggdrasil, he was able to restrain Doom and decided to remind him of the fact that he's almost impossible to beat when he's on his home turf. Bats also joins in on the trash talking and Doom surrenders, pretty much saying that he was a bit too rash in how he behaved. Strange lets him go on the faith and trust that Doom is indeed a man of his word, and that if he lets him go, he will not retaliate and he will leave peacefully. However, Doom also promises to find a way to break time with or without Strange's help, and Strange promises that if Doom steps too far out of line, he's going to come and stop him personally. Before Doom leaves again, he also warns Strange that a great evil will be coming for New York, and while he's safe in his house of truth, the city will be drowned in darkness. He leaves right after, and Strange opened up a portal to the astral plane, sending the Darkhold inside to hide it from would-be thieves. Months later, Strange felt the fabric of time and space start to rip apart at the seams, and he knew right away that this was Doom's doing. As the disturbance was tearing through dimensions, including the astral plane, Strange made a last-second choice to cast a spell to try and protect and save his reality, but it failed, and as a result, he ended up trapped in the astral plane, leaving New York in the world without its best defense and offense when it comes to not only magical threats, but the oncoming vampire threat that will be soon making its way to New York City. We pick up with Moon Knight, who's currently defending one of Khonshu's temples from the Zodiac, when Khonshu calls out to him, "To me, my Moon Knight." Moon Knight brushed him off, saying he was busy protecting his temple and that he needs to call him back later, but Khonshu's voice boomed again, saying, "Now." Moon Knight caught a serious burst of pain in his head from Khonshu's yelling, which caused him to try and close his eyes in order to clear his head. When he opened them, instead of being back in the temple, he was now in the divine space that Khonshu uses to watch over all the realms. He spoke to Moon Knight, saying, "I have chosen you for a new battle," as he turned around to see a towering man with a bird's skull for a head. After a short exchange where Moon Knight stated that this divine space is where Khonshu sits pretty while he does his dirty work, Khonshu reminds him that yet again of how he saved his life years ago, and that if Moon Knight wanted it, it would cost him absolutely nothing to alter the terms of their original agreement, which is his life in exchange for his service. Moon Knight said no, and that he wanted to finish a mission before being tossed into a new one because Khonshu had a bad habit of occasionally pulling him out at a moment's notice. But Khonshu assures him that this one was extremely important and that it could not wait. As he was talking, Moon Knight noticed that Khonshu felt different. He was more confident, powerful, and unlike Mark, Jake, and Steven, he seemed to be in his right mind for someone whose persona had been scattered and fragmented over the years. Moon Knight was itching to get back into the fight, leading to Khonshu asking about vampires. Moon Knight responded that besides the fact that they generally suck, Dracula owes him money. Khonshu then goes off about how for ages he's been a protector of innocence in the night, but ever since vampires started to step on the stage, his mission has been constantly hindered, and now he's worried because of a vision he had recently that warned him of that very threat becoming a more permanent one. Moon Knight told him that there's not many threats more permanent beyond being immortal, but when it comes to the vampires specifically, the curse is what kept them in check. Any evil deed that they take can only be done during the nighttime, which is also when Khonshu is on the clock. But after Moon Knight makes a joke about daylight savings time getting ready to end, a mystery voice tells him that daylight itself is about to end. It was Doom himself who broke into the divine space, and Khonshu got pissed seeing him on sacred territory and commanded Moon Knight to get rid of him. Moon Knight was a bit reluctant at first, but continued anyway, proceeding to attack Doom with his various weapons only to have them easily deflected. Doom then says, "I did not come here for a battle, Khonshu, but if you must turn your champion against me as a matter of honor, then so be it." Within seconds, Doom has summoned the daggers of Dormammu, confident that they will make short work of Moon Knight. As they fought, Moon Knight was putting up a good fight, but since he had no time to recover from the previous fight against the Zodiac, his reactions were starting to slow down, and Doom noticed and took advantage. He started getting more aggressive and knocked him down with a kick to the chest, and then used his daggers to pin Moon Knight to the floor through his cape, and Khonshu ended the fight before Moon Knight himself was ended, saying that Doom had won the right to speak, only for him to respond, and when Doom speaks, all had best listen. Doom talks about how not many people know the true origins of vampires, about how they were born from an ancient curse written in the Dark Code and in the blood of Varney, the very first vampire and Dracula's mentor. The curse, known as the vampiric verses, gave them immortality, and Doom believes that something in that spell is the missing key to understanding how to control time itself. Khonshu says Doom doesn't know what he's messing with, and Doom says that he would know in full if Strange hadn't declined giving him access to the Dark Code. He's also aware that he hid it in another plane of reality, the astral plane to be exact. Moon Knight seems glad Strange made the right choice, since at first glance it seems like Doom wants to unleash more vampires on the world, but Doom actually only wants a small portion of it, which brings us to why Doom is really here. He wants Khonshu to hold the moon in place and plunge a small city into an eternal night, and that would allow him the time he needs to study the vampires themselves if he can't get access to the vampiric verses. Khonshu declined instantly, claiming that whichever city he picked, it would become both a playground and a nesting ground for the vampires, putting an untold number of innocents in danger. Doom laughed, asking when did God start caring about the lives of mortals and normal people, again trying to persuade him that they can control the vampires however they wanted, then could completely get rid of them when they're done. Khonshu cuts him off, telling Doom that the stakes are higher than he could ever realize, and that in the background there is a coming darkness, a certain shadow that threatens every god currently on the board, and he's already been making moves against other gods like Bast herself, who's already been corrupted, and his darkness is only spreading even more. Moon Knight failed in his job to remove Doom from the divine space, but Khonshu doesn't share those same limitations. As Doom is being cast out, he yells that Khonshu is making a terrible mistake and that Doom will get what he wants no matter what. After taking a moment to ponder the looming threat to the gods building in the shadows, the coming possibility of daylight itself ending and Doom of all people breaking into his divine space, he was speechless for a moment, only for him to then tell Moon Knight that he's going to go and find the Darkhold. Moon Knight is wondering why Khonshu wants it, and if it's better off where Strange hid it. Khonshu explained that the book holds both the problem and solution to the current situation. If the problem is the vampiric verses, then the solution would be the Montesi formula. While he's looking for the Darkhold, Moon Knight will be acting in the current fight against the vampires and yells at Moon Knight for suggesting that he call Blade to help out, saying that he is not my fist of vengeance. Also, Blade is currently unavailable and going straight to voicemail, so he's not an option to begin with. After finishing their talk, he sends Moon Knight back to New York to prepare for the coming battle. Picking up from where we left off, with Doom warning Doctor Strange that a darkness would soon be coming to drown New York City in darkness, and him being casted out of Khonshu's domain after trying to get him to help with his plan of plunging the city into eternal night. We fast forward to Doom paying a visit to the Lord of Vampires himself, Dracula, hoping to propose an offer so grand that not even Dracula will turn it down. Dracula laughs at the fact that Doom of all people would bring him a gift, assuming that Doom believes that he had the same morals as the supervillains of this day and age who wouldn't mind doing a bit of evil for some cash. Doom teases that his gift could give Dracula permanent reign over the night itself and maybe even more, which leads to Dracula pretty much repeating this famous meme. Doom then presents to Dracula the Chronovium and explains how it was created from his experiments, forging a shard of pure time energy. After studying both the crystal and ancient magical texts, Doom comes to the conclusion that a drop of blood from an immortal being could alter the crystal and unlock the hidden powers and secrets within. Doing so would give Dracula absolute control over time itself, even though it's stuck to a limited area. Dracula says in theory the idea does sound amazing, but seeing as how this is Doom he's dealing with, he's not quick to trust this word, and for good reason. Doom pushes the idea that they will both benefit from this. Dracula will get a permanent feeding ground for his army and a bigger empire as well, while Doom specifically wants him to set up shop in New York City, because if he's in New York, then all the heroes will be stuck in the city fighting Dracula and his army, which means that they can't interfere with Doom as he works to gain control of the time stream entanglement. Doom then sweetens the deal by explaining that the absolute end goal for Dracula is for him and his army to eventually walk in the daylight without harm like the Daywalker himself, Blade, and that with the Darkhold, it could turn from a dream into reality. Dracula recognizes what he's talking about as the vampiric verses, the same spell that his mentor used to create his kind in the first place, and because of that, he picks up on the fact that Doom is definitely hiding something from him. Doom does agree that he's hiding part of his true motives, but swears on the soul of his mother that he's not trying to deceive him. He swears that Dracula will get his day in the sun if he allows it. So, with that being said, they make an uneasy alliance and Dracula provides the drop of blood, which leads us into season 1 of Marvel Rivals, Empire of Eternal Night. So from here, we're going to be picking up with a Scarlet Witch, who was the Sorcerer Supreme of her reality due to her Doctor Strange dying in the final battle of the First Demon War. She was meditating, looking for where magical power would be building and where possible conflicts due to magic clashing would take place when she heard her name called. She slightly jumped at the mention due to the fact that it's been a very long time since somebody used her actual name. The voice was familiar to her, but she could also tell that it was coming from another realm. Strange introduced himself and wasn't shocked to find out that this world's version of him was dead, because in most other realities, Stephen Strange is dead, and the few that he found that were alive didn't trust him. Wanda is the first person who's not only held a conversation with him, but who's held a conversation with him for this long, and he's thankful because his situation is extremely dire. The time stream entanglement trapped him in the astral plane, and due to countless realities mashing together, he can't find his original body. So he's coming to Wanda for help finding his original body, believing that her mastery of chaos magic is the perfect fix to sort through the chaos that is the entanglement currently happening. Wanda's guard went back up from hearing this, and Strange confirmed that he's still in his world, and that this conversation is not only happening across dimensions but across reality itself. Strange said that he could find his own way back home after some serious trial and error, but currently doesn't have the time to do so since New York is currently under attack by Dracula, and if too much time passed, not even the Darkhold would be able to stop him. Wanda drifted off after hearing about the Darkhold because in her reality the book was gone, possibly even destroyed, but the book itself could give Wanda exactly what she needed in order to save her reality. Because of this, Wanda dropped her guard and Strange's full projection was able to appear, noting that this Strange looked a bit more fancier than hers did, and to be fair, Strange definitely does have that shit on, if I might say so myself. After diving into the astral plane, Wanda saw numerous things like an upside-down New York, lost Viking spirits, and a glimpse of the old ones she recently beat to save her universe. She does end up focusing back on the task at hand, with Strange explaining that Dracula is after the promise of an eternal night, and he's already on the fast track to unlocking the secrets to letting vampires walk in the daylight like the Daywalker himself, Blade. Strange shows her a New York under a red moon in a central park that now houses Dracula's castle. He also explains that among the many complications currently in play, Chronovium is the biggest one, but in her world, it will look a lot different as Chronovium takes on a different form depending on where it was created, and thanks to Doom, they're everywhere now. The reason Wanda hadn't noticed is because she's been too busy keeping her reality from collapsing, which only told her that she's been focusing too hard on sitting on the sidelines, and it's time for her to finally get back in the field. So they made a deal. If she helps Strange find a way back home and helps out with Dracula, he'll return the favor by helping her save her reality, but what she really wants is the Darkhold. Strange explains that he tossed the book in the astral plane to keep it safe from Doom, but Khonshu had gotten a hold of the book while Strange was trapped and is planning to use it to stop Dracula, which does sound like a good thing at face value when you first hear it, but the downside is that every innocent person who was turned into a vampire will also be caught in a crossfire, severely raising an already extremely high body count. Wanda asks if there was a way to get it back, and Strange has already took action, having challenged Khonshu to a game of chess, and Wanda was surprised that it wasn't a game of Senate he picked instead. And if Strange wins, the book is his, and once he wins, Wanda will help him return home. She definitely has her doubts about if whether or not this will go how both of them wanted it to go, but this was a risk that she needed to take because her reality is constantly on a state of decay. It's dying. The Darkhold has finally made its way back onto Wanda's radar and she couldn't lose it again. If she could master the book, her dying universe could be saved and she could stop the ongoing wars between both gods and immortals. She's putting a lot of faith in the fact that Strange will eventually see her side of things and let her use the book to save her reality. And if he doesn't, she's more than prepared to take it by force in order to save what's hers. So now we're going to jump over to Mr. Fantastic, who's been spending all his time studying Chronovium, but he also understood that he needed help, so he decided to partner with somebody that he claims is the smartest woman in any universe, and that's Princess Shuri. After the time stream entanglement happened, Reed got a distress call from Wakanda, but not the one that he knew. This call came from a Wakanda in another reality that was now an intergalactic empire. After being introduced, Shuri explained how she was also looking for a way to fix the time stream entanglement, but also realized that she couldn't do it alone. So, after they met, they started sharing notes between each other in friends like Tony Stark and managed to build something called a time stream reintegration device that would restore every reality back to its normal state. But the only issue was finding a big enough power source, and Reed felt that the Chronovium crystals were the key. They share notes and state how the second law of thermodynamics are still in play here. All Chronovium crystals share the same base structure, but are constantly shifting in response to the universe that it's in. In Shuri's universe, the Chronovium was strengthened by the vibranium star in the heart of their empire, which she calls Chronovibranium. In Reed's universe, the dark magic keeping New York trapped in an eternal night has tampered the Chronovium there, leading Tony to call it Blood Chronovium. So now, Reed and Shuri are trying to catalog the many other chronoverses to know which ones they need to fix, and also to find out what other kinds of chronovium can be used in their experiments to fix everything. Shuri informs Reed that Captain America had also recently just arrived at Wakanda, but this was not the Captain America that Reed and Tony knew because their Cap recently died in battle following the beginning events of the time stream entanglement. The Cap that's with Shuri now is a version of him that, instead of waking up in the present day after being unfrozen, woke up in 2099. Reed knows about 2099 because of Spider-Man telling him about a person named Spider-Zero coming to ask him for his help in order to save the Web of Life and Destiny. 2099 is also the current meeting place for both mutants who lost their home universe and the island nation of Krakoa, according to Wolverine. Reed points out how that might actually be his version of Krakoa that got time displaced because the island from his universe vanished into thin air along with a handful of his mutants. Shuri then informs him that she's been getting together a team of heroes across time and space to combat the growing darkness in her universe, which we now know was Null, and mentions how the gods are in danger as well. Reed informs her that Loki has taken over Yggdrasil, which is the combination of Asgard and Yggdrasil, which formed into one place due to the entanglement, and also states how his Strange just got back from being trapped in the astral plane and he found a universe where gods are in an endless war for control, which also just happens to be Scarlet Witch's home universe. So as of now, they know of 4 different chronoverses, and time is running out because those chronoverses are starting to collapse and intertwine even more than they already are. So T'Challa decided to help out their new but familiar allies and visit Reed's universe to deliver a heart-shaped herb, hoping that it would help with a cure for vampirism so that they can get back to focusing on the task at hand. But it's been a week since he's made contact with anyone, and this is Reed's first time finding out about the delivery, saying that while he might have arrived here safe, what happened afterwards is a mystery due to Dracula's takeover of New York. So while they pray that T'Challa is safe, they reassure each other that they're in this fight together no matter what. So jumping back over to the more mystical side of things, we pick back up with Bats the Ghost Dog, recapping the meeting that went down between Doom and Strange, where Doom came asking for the Darkhold, and after a quick fight that Doom ended up losing, Strange hid the book in the astral plane, but not before Doom warned him about a coming darkness that would drown New York in an eternal night. Now, after the entanglement trapped Strange in the astral plane, Khonshu went looking for it after Doom broke into his domain and tried pulling Khonshu into his plan to drown New York into a state into eternal night after Strange declined giving him the Darkhold. Khonshu was fearful of his vision that showed him daylight being erased forever, having spent centuries protecting the innocent during the nighttime through countless avatars like Moon Knight, and he's not that big a fan of Dracula and his army going on a permanent feeding frenzy in New York because his whole thing is justice in the nighttime and they directly counter that. So he's using the Darkhold with the same intent as Strange, which is to stop Dracula and save New York, but there's one major difference between the two. People like Strange, Reed, and Tony are trying to save everyone, while Khonshu and Moon Knight are more than willing to sacrifice the innocents turned into vampires in order to save everyone else still lucky enough to be human. Because as Moon Knight would say, there are casualties in war that just have to be accepted. So Khonshu captured Strange when he came looking for the Darkhold and tried to force him to cast the spell, but thanks to a word of advice from the Scarlet Witch, Strange played a trump card. While the original game played was supposed to be chess, Strange remembered her saying that Khonshu loves the Egyptian board game Senate, which I originally thought was a fancy version of chess, but is actually the precursor to backgammon. Now, the reason why the odds are in Strange's favor is because even though Khonshu loves the game, he's terrible at it. Like a majority of players who play Rivals and Insta-lock duelists, just to go 2-21 and then blame the healers for not healing and the tanks for not being a Michio. Back to the story. Khonshu actually lost to a god called Thoth and lost his radiance in the bet, which is the reason for why the moon waxes and wanes. So, Strange challenged him to Senate, putting not only the Darkhold on the line, but his life as well. The gamble paid off as Strange ended up winning back the Darkhold, using a strategy that Doom supposedly hinted to Strange on accident, but if we know Doom, nothing he does is on accident, causing Strange to put his piece in the House of Truth and Khonshu's piece drowned in a House of Water. Now this is Doom we're talking about. Again, he does nothing by accident. So Strange is back home with the Darkhold, and Scarlet Witch is currently working on a way to not only help him save the city, but also to fix the time stream entanglement as well. While in the background, she still has her eyes on taking the Darkhold back to her reality so that she can save everything that she loves. Elsewhere in the city, Iron Man could be seen out on patrol killing vampires and helping to keep the streets clear, but he was having quite a tough time doing so. He was already annoyed that New York was plunged into a state of eternal night, but what made it worse for him was that since vampires already count as technically dead, that meant a large chunk of his arsenal, like his missiles, were only useful for destroying property instead of vampires because they don't have heat signatures, which means that his thermal targeting system has nothing it can lock onto. Friday reminds Tony that since the vampires invaded New York, he's used approximately 1,963 missiles, which adds up to about 98 million, but he's Tony Stark, he's good for the money. He states that he needs to find a better way, and Friday offers to go over the details for mods and improvements he can make to his armor and weapons in order to improve his aim and efficiency, but he brushes her off in order to take out a group of vampires with his trusty repulsor blast that he's known for the old-fashioned way. Friday makes a comment about how his manual targeting might be even worse, but Tony assures her that he's missing on purpose. He's herding them into a corner so that he can unibeam them all to ashes, and his plan works out and he finally gets himself a kill. Tony was able to relieve himself of some stress for the time being, and a voice could be heard over the radio saying that I'm glad you got that out of your system because I need you back in the lab. It was his good friend Reed Richards, who Tony never misses a chance to call a buzzkill and was about to make his way back to the lab while he responded. Tony and Reed had been working around the clock nonstop ever since Doom broke the boundaries between different time streams, which caused them to overlap and get all tangled up, destroying a large number of worlds of realities and throwing the few that managed to survive into total chaos. Tony and Reed, along with help from other super geniuses like T'Challa and Shuri from another reality, started working on a machine that could not only reintegrate the timelines, but it could also restore the remaining realities back to their original state. Their work was going nowhere, however, due to the time stream reintegration device lacking the power needed to get the job done. They needed massive amounts of chrono power, and that could only be attained from chronovium, crystals that were created in the wake of the time stream entanglement. Until they got enough of that, however, Tony was absolutely serious about not using the machine, understanding that if the choice was up to Reed, he would use the machine even if there was a very low chance of failure, and for Tony, the success rate could be 99.9% and he was still opposed to using the device when not at 100% chance of success. He didn't want to risk damaging the space-time fabric any more than it already was, or God forbid the device, which is their only hope of saving everything, and he noticed how Reed didn't necessarily share that same level of concern. Reed informs Tony that Ben came back from his expedition with an extremely pure crystal of chronovium, and Tony fires back saying that unless it's generating enough energy to run the time stream reintegration device at full power, he might as well make it an anniversary gift for Sue. Reed is seriously annoyed at Tony for being so stubborn and says that science requires experimentation, and you can't trust a device that you haven't tested yet to save the universe. Tony's side of this, however, is that whether it's a test run or not, they only have one chance to use that machine without breaking it or making things worse. He's a gambling man at heart, but this gamble was way too big for him to take on without being 100% sure. They talk about how when the time comes, ready or not, the machine will have to be used, and Tony responds saying that even when you think you're ready to pull the trigger, you never really are. A voice from behind him can be heard saying that he's never had that problem, and that voice belongs to Moon Knight, who was sent there by Khonshu to help. Tony says that he's late for the party, only for Moon Knight to explain that Khonshu told him the place that they were currently in was actually a nesting ground for vampires. Yet again, with Tony realizing that his armor is failing to deal with the vampires, he didn't notice that he was led into a trap with a herd of vampires waiting for him. And if not for Moon Knight, Iron Man would have been in major trouble due to his thermal sensors not being able to catch creatures who don't have body heat. They dove down from the rafters towards our heroes, starting the fight, causing Iron Man and Moon Knight to quickly jump into action. He then talks about how he thinks Khonshu was starting to make sense, and Iron Man asks Moon Knight what the old god has been saying, and it's that Tony isn't focusing on the little guy, which is a common complaint with heroes like him and the Avengers as a whole. They mostly respond to major threats only, often forgetting about the little guy that can't defend themselves. Granted, we do have street level heroes like Spidey, Cloak and Dagger, Squirrel, and more, but Khonshu's whole point is that they often get distracted looking at the grand scale only. Tony responds saying that stopping the vampires first and then fixing the time stream is easier said than done because every plan that they've made so far has failed, leading Moon Knight to say that science is not the fix here. You have to fight magic with magic. Moon Knight lays out a plan to use something called the Montesi formula, which will end the vampire threat for good, but the problem currently is that the Darkhold is scattered across the city. It happened with Wanda helped Strange return home from being trapped in the astral plane, and now both the heroes and Dracula are in a race to recover all of the pages that were scattered from the Darkhold, but to gather two very specific pages, the Vampiric Verses and the Montesi Formula. Now, Khonshu knows where the page that holds the Montesi Formula is, but before they leave, Moon Knight explains the final but biggest catch of this plan. Using this spell will kill all vampires, innocents included. Tony isn't too keen on having that many casualties, but Moon Knight uses his past as a weapons dealer to explain that Tony should know casualties are a part of war and that it's unavoidable. Tony said the price for him was way too high, words both he and Moon Knight never thought that he would say. But as each day passes, Tony's hope continues to fail, and he knows that it won't be too long until he finds himself coming around completely to Khonshu's plan if nothing else works. Moon Knight asks Tony one last time if he's joining him, but before he could answer, he got an alarm about an Asgardian power spike in Central Park that wasn't Thor, which worried him. He asked if Moon Knight was going to be joining him, and he responded saying that depended on whose side Tony was going to fight for. After thinking about how his side has done nothing but produce zero results every time, Tony decided it was time for a change. They head to Central Park to help Ratatoskr and Squirrel Girl, who were being hunted by Dracula, and after swooping in to save Squirrel Girl last second, Dracula used that distraction to take Ratatoskr and lock her up with Blade in his castle, taking two of his biggest threats off the board and leaving Iron Man and the others to retreat back to Avengers Tower. We pick up with Squirrel Girl standing proud after beating another horde of vampires, celebrating with her squirrel army and promising to take them to Mr. Hickory's fresh roasted nut cart before Tippy Toe, her right-hand squirrel, came to tell her that a giant squirrel had just crash landed in Central Park. She didn't believe it at first, but Tippy Toe was very adamant about it, so Squirrel Girl decided to postpone the victory snack with her friends to follow Tippy Toe into the heart of Central Park. When they arrived, she saw the biggest squirrel that she had ever seen, but the squirrel was also badly hurt. She asked if it needed help, and Ratatoskr agreed, saying yes, not sure of where she landed, but very aware that the smell of the realm she was in was familiar to her. Squirrel Girl told her that she was on Earth and was shocked that Ratatoskr could talk. Doreen can naturally understand squirrels, but this squirrel in particular could actually talk like a human being, leading Ratatoskr to say that it's a shame that Earth squirrels can't talk like her after being shocked from what Doreen had told her. As they talked, Ratatoskr shared her story about how she comes from both Asgard and Yggdrasil. Doreen asked her if she knew Thor, and Ratatoskr says that she knew him since he was just a little boy, and that it's also her duty to climb around the world tree delivering messages until she was unfortunately snatched from her post. Doreen thought that it might have been Loki's doing at first, but Ratatoskr assured her that besides her already growing issues with Loki, this was not his doing. She had a vision of the two men that brought her here, a mortal sorcerer in a metal mask and the Lord of Vampires himself, which ends up being Dr. Doom and Dracula, present-day Doom to be specific. Doom and Dracula casted a spell that stole Ratatoskr from the World Tree and forced her onto Midgard, right into Dracula's stronghold, which is currently Central Park. Doreen was wondering exactly why they wanted her over every single other hero in the city that's already trying to stop them, and Ratatoskr explained that it's because of her enchanted horn. Her horn is made from Yggdrasil itself, covered and bathed in the power that comes from the World Tree, meaning that her horn is powerful enough to kill Dracula if it can pierce his heart. So as a precaution, he's trying to take as many threats, including her, off the board as soon as possible so that there's no real threat to his overall reign. As they talk, another horde jumped out planning to take Ratatoskr, but Squirrel Girl's army jumped into the action to protect her, overpowering the horde. A second wave twice as large came after the first were defeated, but this time Dracula himself decided to step into the fight. He motioned for Squirrel Girl to step aside and let him take Ratatoskr, but she disagreed, and Dracula assured him that he wasn't going to hurt Ratatoskr, but she wouldn't have the same guarantee for herself, stating the words, "So swears Dracula." This was Doreen's first time meeting him and was shocked that the big man himself was even here to begin with, and Dracula promised that Squirrel Girl would be the next person to join his ever-growing army. As she dodged the incoming vampires, the squirrels were on protection duty. Even though they outnumbered the vampires, they were still outmatched, as next to Dracula being here, he brought out his heavy hitters, so it became a matter of power over numbers. So in response, Tippy Toe called out to every animal still in Central Park to join the fight. Rats, raccoons, frogs, cats, birds, and more, you name it. Squirrel Girl was surprised that Tippy actually called in birds to help, not aware of the fact that Tippy could speak bird. But the truth is, Tippy didn't actually call them, and they weren't normal birds either. They were actually ravens and crows sent by both Hela and Loki, who were looking for Ratatoskr as well. Regardless, they still joined in to help protect her. They were holding on to vampires for a moment until all of the squirrels, including Tippy Toe, froze in place. Dracula then reveals that Squirrel Girl isn't the only person that can talk to rodents, and decided to send all of them after Squirrel Girl, intending to tear her apart limb by limb. But before they could, a shot from the sky hit the squirrels and freed them from Dracula's control. It was Iron Man and Moon Knight coming to help. Squirrel Girl explained the situation, and Iron Man said that they were leaving now because they didn't have the means to fight off many more vampires, let alone Dracula himself. This is the fight they were not ready for. And Squirrel Girl said that they can't leave without Ratatoskr. But Moon Knight was confused because he said he couldn't see the giant squirrel that he was told about, which means that Dracula took the chance to escape with Ratatoskr while Squirrel Girl was distracted by her army turning on her, and before Iron Man and Moon Knight arrived to see it happen, since they never saw Ratatoskr to begin with. Squirrel Girl and Tippy Toe were sad and upset because not only were they leaving behind their friends to fight for themselves, as Iron Man flew away with her back to Avengers Tower, she felt like she was leaving Ratatoskr for dead. The recent situation left her defeated, with Iron Man assuring her that it was for the best, while Squirrel Girl, however, thought about how for the first time in a very long time, her usually unbreakable optimism was gone. Now we're gonna jump over to Spider-Man, who's been down in the dumps over his current situation. Ever since New York was invaded, he's been stuck on the island fighting for his life while also worrying about his Aunt May, who he visited every Wednesday for lunch ever since he moved out. He couldn't get back over to Queens because the Queensboro Bridge, all of the Manhattan bridges to be exact, were heavily guarded by vampires, stopping everyone from leaving or entering the island. So instead, he would head over to various places by the bridge so that he could see Aunt May's house, and he made this a regular weekly thing. He would make sure he's safe by clearing and casing the area before he let his guard down, and would take some time to himself thinking about various things like life before the time stream entanglement and how he was here last week doing the same thing, wishing there was a way for him to go and see his Aunt May, while also being annoyed about being left out of what he calls the super genius think tank that's working on the time stream reintegration device. Peter wasn't allowed to work on the project, and that annoyed him because while Peter knows that he could possibly help in some kind of way, Tony and Reed pretty much agreed that Peter fighting on the streets would be a lot better than him helping out on the project as a whole. Now, as this is happening, two fingers holding a piece of paper appeared in the sky, which then dropped the piece of paper onto Peter's knee and vanished. The paper contained a message from the Master Weaver and Spider-Zero asking for his help, saving the web of life and destiny, and that when it's time, Spider-Zero is coming back to get him. This Peter also doesn't know about the web at this point in his life, which left him very confused about both it and Spider-Zero until a portal opened up next to him, and it was Spider-Zero herself coming to pick him up and stating that the web needed him. Peter couldn't bring himself to go, saying that he belonged there in New York instead, with Spider-Zero retaliating, saying that Spider-Man belongs everywhere. She begged him again to join her, and he was cautious because he couldn't risk leaving without knowing if getting back would be easy. So as a compromise, she showed him both the web and Tokyo 2099 through the portal instead, showing the destiny of all spiders connected to the web and explaining that if the web fails, both all spider people and reality itself will vanish. Sticking to his original answer, he further explains that he can't go and leave New York while it's in this state, but when things start getting crazy, he will jump in to help them however he can. Spider-Zero leaves, and Peter starts thinking about the web and how Tony has a multiverse model that's very close to how that web looked, but as a whole, Peter knew he was out of his depth. He knows about string theory to an extent, but he just can't work on it the same way that Tony and Reed could. He was aware that watching something and doing something are two very different things, and while he was pondering that thought, his train of thought was actually broken when one of his best friends, the Human Torch, flew over. It had been an hour since Peter, Johnny, and Ben took down a deviant mutate, one of the Mole Man's monsters, who was turned into a vampire specifically to take out Johnny because Dracula was getting annoyed with him constantly destroying his legions. Johnny was looking for Peter all this time because Reed learned from Squirrel Girl's friends that Blade was spotted in Central Park, and that they had to get to him before Dracula does. The whole time, Spidey was just happy that Johnny wasn't coming to him with news about a vampired out Galactus joining the party. They got to Central Park and saw Blade surrounded by bodies as he was cutting through vampires like butter, leading Blade to asking if they were ever going to join the fight or just keep watching. The trio all jump into battle as Blade explained the only reason for why he was in New York was because he was on a recon mission trying to understand how Dracula pulled all this off, and he still doesn't believe what he found out, which would be information regarding the Darkhold. As they were fighting, Peter was thinking about how Blade's capture could mean Dracula gets the ability to walk in the daylight, having used Blade's blood as the solution for it. They cleared out all the vampires only for Peter to ask if they were done, and his spider sense started going haywire, letting them know that something worse was coming. Dracula himself ended up joining the fight, surprising Johnny because ever since New York was taken over, Dracula had almost never been seen in public. He would only leave the castle for very serious things that he deemed was worth his time, like for example, going after Blade or even Ratatoskr. Now both Peter and Johnny started firing webs and fire at Dracula only for him to dodge everything while he barely even tries to dodge in general, leading to Blade trying to engage him with sword combat and Dracula choosing to do the same, confident that Blade will lose if they fight. For every attack that Blade threw, Dracula had a counter for it and left no openings, making it impossible for Blade to land a hit. Peter knew that Blade was close to losing, so he and Johnny got ready for an ambush, creating a wall of fire and launching web balls through it that ended up hitting Dracula, distracting him long enough for Blade to kick his swords out of his hands. But other than disarming him, nothing else was gained as Dracula still blocked every attack from Blade. Spidey ended up trying to web his feet and was successful, and then tried to kick Dracula in the teeth, only to get duped as Dracula turned into a mist and Spidey went right through him. Johnny and Blade teamed up to throw flaming stakes at Dracula's heart only to have them get blocked, and Dracula took that opportunity to go and grab Spidey by the throat. He was planning on drinking Peter dry until Blade offered himself as tribute, his life for Spidey's. As Spidey tried to get his footing back after being tossed to the ground, he remembered Dracula turning into a giant bat and attacking both Blade and Johnny, knocking out Johnny's flames and grounding him. In the end, Dracula dragged Blade away back to the castle as he fought back, leaving both Spidey and Johnny beaten and forced to watch their friend get taken, leaving Peter to think that maybe he should have left with Spider-Zero after all. So in this chapter, this is where we get our first introduction to the legendary vampire hunter himself, Blade. We pick up with him recapping who he is for the readers and explaining why he does what he does. Now at some point in time, Blade caught wind that Dracula was planning something massive, so he decided to head straight for Transylvania to find out what, only to find out that Dracula wasn't home. By this time, he had already put the plans in motion to turn New York into his empire of eternal night. Blade was worried, not only because Dracula had a new trick in his playbook that he didn't expect. This trick took away the daylight, which was his biggest advantage against the vampires. Now when Blade got back to New York, he headed straight for Central Park and up the trail of bodies behind him as he found out Dracula had put his fortress right smack dab in the middle of Central Park. Blade ended up walking right into a trap as they were waiting for him, knowing that Blade would eventually make his appearance. The vampires knew he was coming and he got ambushed, but he survived due to Human Torch and Spider-Man showing up because they've been doing patrols together since the night became permanent and heard that something was going down in the park, so they went over to help out. But in the end, Blade ended up giving his life to save Spider-Man's, and he got dragged into the depths of Dracula's castle fortress. Dracula played this smart because without the daylight, there are only a few serious threats to him in the world, and with the capture of Blade, he now has control over two of them. The first one being the Asgardian squirrel Ratatoskr, who was also looking for outside help due to Loki taking control over Yggdrasil and banishing Thor. The reason why Dracula and Doom summoned Ratatoskr was to capture her because her horn is enchanted and it can kill anything it pierces, including immortal beings. So, with those two characters off the board, Dracula can now move unchecked as not many others will have the tools or skills needed to come even close to stopping him. And even though the other heroes are trying, the vampire numbers are steadily growing each day. So, Blade and Ratatoskr are currently in chains, hoping that someone comes to set them free so they can rejoin the fight and end this eternal night. We pick up with Moon Knight, who's currently talking to Khonshu. More like he's leaving him a voicemail, if we're being honest, because sometimes this whole talking thing is more of a one-way street than it is a two-way. He's been updating Khonshu on the current events. Moon Knight has been protecting the city ever since he arrived, and has been quite the mission, seeing as how the city has been overrun with vampires. In the process, however, he's managed to build a team of other heroes who have been taking the fight to Dracula alongside him, and he's thankful for that. He says that he's now a knight with his very own round table, and that they call themselves the Eternity Knights. Sounds like a 2000s rock band to me, if we're being honest, but this entire season, Definitely could have a soundtrack written by Ozzy Osbourne or Metallica if they really wanted, so at least the name fits. The formation of this team started when he recruited Iron Man to his side after he realized that his side of science wasn't providing any results. But while Iron Man made the decision to take a more aggressive approach and get his hands dirty, the other heroes like Reed and Strange wouldn't be joining them anytime soon. They're trying to save everyone, which is respectable, but both Iron Man and Moon Knight understand that there are casualties in war and that it's unavoidable. All you can do is the best you can do. He talks about how Reed and Squirrel Girl, who they recently saved from dying at the hands of Dracula while letting him capture Ratatoskr instead, disagreed with his plan. So, while they sit in the strongholds that have come to be both the Baxter Building and Avengers Tower, they're out on the street saving as many people as they possibly can and giving the unlucky ones a quick and painless death. Their future teammates ended up being Psylocke, Winter Soldier, Wolverine, and Adam Warlock. Wolverine and Winter Soldier have no issue getting their hands dirty and were fitting right in as they were doing what they do best. And Moon Knight admitted that the new girl with the giant sword just might be a better hunter than even him, which could be true considering this Psylocke comes from a reality where she hunts demons just as much as Blade hunts vampires, which definitely explains the high level of efficiency that she's showing out there in the war. It also doesn't hurt to have someone like Iron Man on the team because that means everybody's getting suit upgrades, even more since their upgrades are currently tweaked out with Chronovium, giving them access to its ability to rewind time. Moon Knight also comes across a man in fancy white armor who he didn't fully recognize but pointed out that he's seen him somewhere before. That man was actually Black Panther, who had fell victim to the vampires shortly after arriving, but this was a bit different because instead of turning into a normal vampire, he was actually seen leading a pack of vampires, and Moon Knight said that it looked like Panther could give Dracula a run for his money. Moon Knight then signs off, saying that he'll continue saving people and taking the fight to Dracula, while also not knowing if Khonshu was ever listening to him to begin with. So while the street level heroes have been out there keeping the city safe, Reed and Strange are currently in Reed's lab, excited because they now have almost every page of the Darkhold back in the book. And Reed says that the chronal energy that's attached itself to the pages should be enough to get the time stream reintegration device running. They just have to extract the energy from every page that they have. A voice could be heard coming over the intercom going, "Not so fast, fellas." It was Iron Man, rushing back to the Baxter Building to stop them from turning the device on, joking about how the device was a joint effort and that he never misses a product launch that he's involved in. Strange and Reed instantly went on the defensive, with Strange putting the pages into the chronal siphon and Reed saying that he's going outside to deal with Iron Man himself. Iron Man then laughed, asking how Reed was going to do that, and responded saying that is by building an untested device and then turning it on without the full amount of required energy to run it properly and do its job, only to then say that Reed has been doing that the entire time actually. Reed then responds saying that Tony knows they don't have time to wait and that the device has to be turned on, swearing that it's going to work because he's crunched all the numbers. Iron Man then makes a seconds joke, counting down from 5 until he breaches the building, leading Reed to turn himself into a barrier guarding the door into the lab. Tony ended up using the backdoor entrance to the lab and shot Reed in the back, which had Strange worried for Reed's well-being because Tony did not hold back on that shot. Tony then expressed that Reed wasn't his target, the pages were, and Reed had just got in the way. They both agree that the pages are their only hope, but only if they have every page, because at this point, there's still 2 pages missing, which conveniently enough are the most important ones because those are the pages that hold both the Montesi formula and their vampiric verses. Without those pages, there's still a chance of failure that Tony is not willing to accept, and he asked Reed if he's ready to bet every surviving universe's fate on a device that's not ready, and all Reed could say was that he didn't know. Johnny Storm is a part of the most famous superhero family on the planet, and their track record would show that they are very good when it comes to saving the world every Tuesday. But recent events might have put a dent in their batting average because ever since Dracula plunged New York into an eternal night, him and all the other heroes have been fighting day in and day out to save the city and find a way to stop Dracula, but that's run into a couple of problems due to the heroes also fighting each other instead of Dracula over what the best course of action to stop him should be. Do they save everyone or do they save who they can? Meanwhile, Johnny's been in and out of the streets in the skies being a one-man wrecking crew against Dracula's army. They can't turn him due to the fact that he's covered in superheated plasma and pretty much a walking, talking, and flying mini sun. While he might not be much of a threat to Dracula himself, Johnny might have a legitimate career in being a vampire hunter if he ever decides to switch things up, and you can bet that has been starting to annoy the hell out of Dracula. The heroes have been at it for a while now, and not only is the fatigue starting to set in, but time is quickly running out. Dracula is starting to make his final play to perform one last ritual, which may give him what he's been after for centuries, and that's the ability to walk in the daylight. So, Invisible Woman is leading a strike team into Dracula's castle while Reed continues working on the TRD, and Johnny is set to make a major distraction so that his sister can get inside of the castle unnoticed and get to Dracula with little to no problems, hopefully. And he's also fully aware that if things do get dire, he can push his powers to go supernova, which will turn him into a literal mini sun for a small moment, but the risk of him dying from it is very real and very possible. He's not too upset about that though, because if he does go down, he's going to make sure that it's going to be in a blaze of glory, showing everyone that he's the star and hero he always knew he was meant to become. So this is all now from the viewpoint of Doom 2099, who's been keeping a close eye on exactly what his younger other version of himself has been doing. He admits that he underestimated himself after seeing just exactly what present day Doom has managed to pull off. Doom 2099 originally thought that he should pay no mind to what present Doom and Dracula were doing when he gave Dracula Chronovium to drown New York in darkness, but failed to realize that no matter the timeline, no matter the version, Doom always has a much bigger picture in mind. As you know by now, Dracula went against his better judgment and sided with Doom, being even more fooled about Doom's true intentions when he was given the means to find the vampiric verses, the missing page from the Darkhold. Now, Dracula's plans were to usher in a new age for his kind. He believed that he could summon an infinite army of vampires and drink the world itself dry, and throughout all of this, still knew that something was off with present Doom, but chose to look the other way because of what he saw on the horizon. He was blinded by his dream, and it was entirely too tempting to let slip through his hands when it was that close. Him choosing to look the other way, however, would be the very thing that ended up losing Dracula the war against the heroes, because Doom had been lying to Dracula from the start. Doom did not want Dracula to raise more vampires to increase his ranks. Doom wanted to further understand the essence of the immortality granted by the curse, then reverse engineer that with blood chronoviums to turn it into pure blood chronovium. One drop of blood was enough to lock the moon in place and allow the vampires to run free, so naturally, Doom imagined what an endless supply of immortal blood can do. It would allow him to reach his main goal, which is to break time to his will and shape it however he wants. Now, Doom couldn't act in the open due to Strange promising to pay Doom a visit if he continues with this plan, and the other heroes would more than likely join him as well. So, Doom played the game from the shadows, moving pieces around the board however he wished, tricking both the heroes and Dracula into doing exactly what he wanted in order to get his end result. Doom switched to the hero side after he noticed that the vampiric verses were found, and gave them help from the shadows to beat Dracula without each side ever knowing what fully happened. Everything went according to plan, and Doom 2099 was impressed, as present day Doom left with the pure blood chronovium in his possession, and he admits that he lost this round. They both are in a race to gain control of the time stream entanglement and shape it however they wish it to be, and present day Doom is now currently in the lead. Doom 2099 isn't giving up though, vowing to show exactly why he is the one true Doom, but not before he has to head out to attend a very important gala that is taking place, the Hellfire Gala to be exact. And knowing how the last Hellfire Gala ended up in the comics, one can only assume just exactly how this one will turn out with someone like Doom being present. That being said, that's going to go ahead and bring us to the end of this video. This was my first time really doing a big lore video like this. It's a learning process as I'm trying on new things and just like discovering ways to make this type of video format even better. It's a learning process. Like I said, I'm gonna pick stuff up as I go. But if you all did enjoy it, please let me know down in the comments below. Let me know if you made it this far in the video, because if you did, I do really appreciate you. And let me know if you all would like to see more lore coverage videos like this around my revivals. We're going to be covering short stories during the season, and then after season's end, we'll cover the main story the same way that we did here. I look forward to seeing what season 2 has to offer, and I hope that we all thoroughly enjoy it. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and smack the notifications bell so you won't ever miss out on any of my Marvel Rivals related videos, and I will catch you all in the moonlight. Peace.